folks. Welcome back to another official Utah County Republican Party podcast. I'm the party vice chair and your host today. I'm Charles Max Wood, and I am here with Trent Staggs. Trent Staggs is running for U.S. Senate. And Trent, I've started all of these off, except one, I guess. I told a story before I talked to Phil Lyman. But, you know, people are looking at their ballots at this point. You know, they see 3 or 4 names on there. What do they need to know about Trent Staggs to go, you know what? This is my guy. This is the decision I want to make.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on here, Charles. I think there's a lot of key differences. What I like to talk about in the way in which I framed this campaign is that I'm the only one in this race that's been willing to challenge the establishment. That's the problem we have. We elect too many people that go back to D.C. to become part of the establishment. They don't stand up against it. They don't work for we the people. And you've seen that in my time as mayor, where I've stood up to COVID lockdowns, mandates, inappropriate materials in school, taxes, you name it. Time and again, I've stood up to establishment forces. I've done it in this race by being the only one. I'm the only one that was willing to challenge Mitt Romney. I announced my candidacy last May 23rd of 2023. And it was my goal to primary Mitt Romney. I didn't care if he was running again or not. He's made the decision that he isn't running, late September. And then that's when we had another 10 people enter the race. The other real distinguishing factor is I am the convention winner. As such, I've got the endorsement of the state party. I am the official Republican nominee for this race. And it's just unfortunate that we even have to have a primary, because in years past, getting more than 60%, it would have automatically been it. So I have been vetted by 4,000 delegates across the state that are elected in their neighborhoods to really find out who is best suited to represent us in this Senate seat. And they have overwhelmingly said that Trent Staggs is that person. And then I've got a national coalition of conservative voices that have endorsed me, like Mark Levin and Charlie Kirk. I've also got other elected officials and just huge conservative leaders like Senators Rand Paul, and also President Trump has endorsed me. So those are all the reasons why I think people should be looking at my candidacy preferentially to any others. Right now, this race is kind of boiling down between me and John Curtis, and I don't think there could be 2 more distinct differences between us.
That's true.
John is somebody who voted for the January 6th committee, one of 35 Republicans that did that. He supported the impeachment inquiry of President Trump. He censured Trump on the House floor. He's refused to endorse President Trump. Even on our debate last night, I mentioned that he refuses to endorse him to this day. He claims he's the only one that has worked with Trump, but that working relationship is not good. I'm somebody who has got a great relationship. He's endorsed me. Look, I'm afraid that we have in John Curtis a Mitt Romney 2.0. He's somebody that clearly doesn't work well with President Trump and does not want to advance an America First agenda, where you have me, who has his endorsement of President Trump, and I have pledged to work and advance an America First agenda. The other key difference between me and John Curtis is the fact that he chairs a climate caucus. Look, I'm not in support of any climate change initiatives. He's also supported by his billionaire friends, these climate change PACs that have poured almost $10 million, these PACs that are supporting him, over $10 million in a race. That's why every other commercial you're seeing is John Curtis, because he's got so much outside money coming in time and again to try to prop his campaign up. And I think we would be completely unreasonable to think that he's not going to owe some favors, once, if he were elected with all this outside money. So a couple of key differences, I think, that everybody should be aware of.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because you're talking about, being the convention nominee and being vetted by all of the delegates. And, I hear some things from some people where they're like, well, the convention, it's not a primary, and so not everybody votes. And I'm like, yeah, but you get people in there who really know what they're talking about, who really go out of their way to understand the issues. They come in and they talk to these folks. The other thing I point out to people, because a lot of folks try and point the delegates as some kind of extreme end of the party. And I'm like, look, they're elected in their precincts. The representation number is like 1 to 150, right? Yeah. And so you're saying that all of these extreme people got elected all across the state. And finally, I've talked to a number of people who thought moderate, voted moderate, got elected as delegates, figured out what was going on, and changed their voting pattern in the way that they look at things. So I think that the convention really validates who these folks are. And you've talked a bunch about the money coming in, and this what we're going through right now with this primary is exactly why we need the caucus system, because
Yeah,
otherwise people are making those decisions based on these ads and other things that they're seeing.
yeah, yeah. It's I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, here we've got 4,000 people that have been elected to a 2-year term. And
Yep.
they have to vet all these candidates. Some of them they spend hours and hours
Yeah.
researching, talking to us. Um, I think it's inspired. It's representative in its very nature, the caucus system, and that allows us to really engage more so with the electorate. And I've pledged to have monthly town halls with delegates, and that's how I think I, as an elected official, can be more accountable, and how I can try to represent the all of the different neighborhoods
Mhm.
throughout the state better in Washington D.C. So I'm a big supporter of the caucus convention system, and it's unfortunate that they changed the rules with Senate Bill 54 a few years back. Allows people to
Yep.
literally buy their way on the ballot, and that's what I have here. I've got 3 other people that have paid to get their name on the ballot, and it's with that many people, and with now marketing to 900,000 Republicans, you get all these outside groups come in,
Right.
and it costs a lot more money. I mean, we've raised probably 1.3, $1.4 million in this race, but when I've got John Curtis spending $12 million, it's unbelievable the
Yep.
type of money and influence. And again, people have to wonder and ask, with all this money that is basically propping somebody up and getting them into office, what kind of influence are they going to have over that person going forward?
Right. Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit more about the convention process just for a second that you went through, and then we can get into some of the other things that kind of differentiate you, I guess, between you and John Curtis. But as you talk to delegates, I mean, we've pointed out some of the issues with John, but what gets people excited about you? Because I mean, you stood up at the convention, and the whole room just exploded. I mean, people were going wild. It's like this is the man, right?
Yeah.
So what are you about? What was it that the delegates were seeing and going, holy cow, this is our man?
Well, I think in this country today, not just delegates, but Americans and Utahns, they're experiencing a lot of frustration with their government because their
Hmm.
government isn't listening to them. And, I come to find out through this campaign process, the reason why I think is because we get so many people that are out of touch, people that are multimillionaires. I mean, my 3 opponents are all multimillionaires.
Yep.
They're funded by huge, either their large pocketbooks or these super PACs that have come in for Curtis, for example. So I don't think that really um, forces elected officials to focus more so on their constituency. And that's the problem we have in this country, that too many people are just out of touch with the constituency. They go back to DC, become part of an establishment. And so I think what I was able to speak to is be voice, for all that frustration, and to demonstrate an ability to do something about it. As a mayor, where I stood up to all of these things, the lockdowns, the COVID mandates, and all that. You've got somebody that's like, finally, we have somebody who's going to stand up and try to go to bat for us, and not just go along and do whatever they say. And I've done it in the way in which I've run this campaign. I think what got people most excited was the fact that I had come out and said, look, I'm going to challenge Mitt Romney. I said, enough is enough. We deserve better representation. That was the topic
Mhm.
or the headline of my opinion piece when I announced my candidacy. Enough is enough. Why I'm going to challenge Mitt Romney. And, Mitt ends up voting with Biden administration 60+% of the time. He'd still prefer to vote for Biden over President Trump. I mean,
Right.
he promised he would put us on a path to a balanced budget. He would end illegal immigration. He'd stop federal spending and overreach, and he'd confirm conservative justices. That's in his video,
Oh
is one
yeah.
of his few 30-second spots that he did 5 years ago. And he hasn't done that. So having the ability to call that out, being willing to primary and stand up to the establishment in Utah, I think shows individuals that I'm going to do that in DC.
Right. Well, and this is something that I've brought up on the other interviews as well, right? Is that, when I was a delegate in 2018, when Mitt Romney was running and a bunch of other people ran, right? Nobody was asking questions about a pandemic because we didn't know it was coming, right?
Right.
And so we asked questions about some of the ongoing painful issues. And then it turned out that we really should have been scrutinizing the character of some of the people that we were electing.
Yeah.
And, the fact that you're willing to stand up to this stuff makes a major difference, because I don't know what the next COVID-19 pandemic like thing is going to be. It could be banking, it could be economy, it could be natural disaster, it could be something completely different. And so the fact that you're willing to stand up says a lot. Now, we do have a couple of other points that I want to get to, but can you tell us just about one instance where you stood up? You've mentioned COVID a bunch of times. That's probably a good place to go, where you basically told the state or federal government, no, we're not doing this.
Well, yeah, many examples. It's on my website at trentstaggs.com. There's a proven fighter page, and you've got 9 or 10 different examples there. If you click on the one about COVID, I rejected lockdowns and mandates. I mean, from the very beginning, in March of 2020, when Salt Lake County Mayor Jenny Wilson said it would be a Class B misdemeanor, $1,000 fine if more than 10 people gathered together. I went straight away to my community via our Riverton City web page or YouTube page rather, and our Facebook. And I said, look, this order that's just come down that I've been asked to enforce is unconstitutional. I've instructed my police department not to enforce, not to prosecute. Go about your business. Then
that is awesome.
In June, when the mask mandate came down, I was interviewed by Brian Malahy of KUTV News. He came out, and the title of the article in the interview was, Riverton mayor says mask mandate is heavy-handed, will not enforce. And we didn't. We didn't enforce here in Riverton. People were free. Then when the Biden administration tried to force a vaccine mandate on any organization with more than 100 employees, remember, and that Riverton City with 50,000 residents, we got 170 roughly full-time equivalent, employees, we would have been under that charge. And I said straight away, before a decision had been made, absolutely not. We will not do this. Employees, don't worry. If you don't want to take the jab, don't take the jab. We're not going to enforce this whatsoever. So time and time again throughout COVID, whether it was the lockdowns, the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, or the attempts thereof, we stood up and said no.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I wish they'd done that here in Lehigh, but
I was
that
shocked
wasn't the case.
And that's something, Charles, I got to say, that really opened my eyes. I mean, I was willing to stand up and say, no, but you should have. That came at a little bit of a cost, because I got some pretty strong hate mail from people thinking I was going to kill everybody. And, some of my colleagues, elected officials, were really frowning upon me. And I was shocked at how few actually were willing to stand up during that time. I mean, to me, was pretty telling that there were so few elected officials that, were willing to do it. So.
Yeah, well, and that is telling, at least for me as a voter as well, right? Because I look at it and I go, okay, because I understand at least to a certain degree, right? As I'm the party vice chair, right? And so sometimes we do stuff that some people in the party don't like, and the pressure's real. It is real, right? I worked in tech, and I said some things that people didn't like. Well, I still work in tech, but I had people cancel me on Twitter and come after my business because they didn't like what I said. And I can imagine for elected officials, it's the same, right? You get these people that are supposed to be on your side, that you work with on a regular basis, coming in and going, Trent, this isn't the way, right? And you've got to be able to stand up to that. And that's the thing that I'm looking for in somebody, because like I said, I can't predict what the next emergency is going to be. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about President Trump. I mean, you mentioned that, your opponent voted to censure him and, has not supported him.
Right.
What does that look like? And what does that look like from you?
In terms of his
lack of support and your support.
Well, this is a Mitt Romney 2.0.
Okay.
We don't need to go there again. I mean, we have an opportunity to elect someone like myself. Why on earth would we want to have somebody else in office that's got a disharmonious relationship with President Trump? And we know that's going to be the case with with John Curtis. I mean, look, he was one of 30-ish Republicans that voted for the January 6th committee. He supported the impeachment inquiry of Trump. He censured him on the House floor. He still won't endorse him to this day. I mean, he's just going to be a constant thorn in the side.
Yeah.
I don't think that we should be doing that. If somebody can't at this point, if they can't wholeheartedly endorse President Trump, that doesn't bode well for the future. And we don't
Yeah.
need, as a state, we don't need somebody in that Senate seat, one of only two people, that's going to have a poor relationship with President Trump. And that is exactly what would happen with John Curtis.
Yep, absolutely. So what's your relationship like with him? I mean, he endorsed you. So I'm assuming you've talked to him.
Yeah, multiple times. He called me for the first time, on the morning of convention, where he offered up his complete and total endorsement, which was fantastic. We talked subsequently a few times, and I got to say, it's remarkable whenever I speak to him, just how self-assured and confident, and just just strong. His strength comes through. I mean, at a time when, look at everything that's been thrown at him.
Oh, no kidding.
I think if it were me, I would be probably communicating a little more anxiety on phone calls and maybe some frustration, everything. No, every time I've talked to him, he's just very solid, and we need his strength back in office. I was the first one to endorse him, elected official in the state of Utah. I came out last summer, shortly after I announced my candidacy, and I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Times that spelled out the reasons why I've endorsed him and why we need him back in office.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because sometimes I get people coming to me and going, well, are you a Trump supporter? And I have to just look at people and go, look, I'm a my value supporter, right? But right now it points to Donald Trump. So yeah, I'm a Trump supporter. I mean, he could lose my support by violating those principles, but there's no indication he has or will.
Right.
And so, I'm behind him 100% until there's a reason not to be, just like any other candidate. And I love that, yeah. And with the patterns we're seeing, and then the way Trump operated when he was president last time, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we've got to have him back in there. We wouldn't have the issues in Ukraine and Israel,
right.
Fighting. If he were in office today, it's going to be very important that we have a Republican majority in 2025, because the tax cuts that he passed in 2017 are set to sunset. That would impact each family by $2,300 just in Utah. Our taxes would go up on average that much for the average household. Mm-hmm. So we have to make sure that happens. Having him back in office to be able to lead that charge is going to be key.
Yep, absolutely. So, I mean, we've kind of talked through a bunch of these issues. Are there other things that people need to know about, you or about your opposition that you want to make sure people are aware of?
Well, I think, look, the biggest thing is that I've demonstrated time and again a willingness to stand up to the establishment. I've done it in my own state, and no other candidate has. If you're not willing to do it in your own state, you're not going to do it in D.C. And with respect to John Curtis, he is somebody who still won't even support President Trump. That's problematic in my mind. He supported that January 6th committee, the impeachment inquiry, censured Trump. That's not good for the state. Have somebody like that representing us. I think it's been demonstrated too that, John Curtis has done very well trading stocks while being in Congress. He's made a ton of money. I called that out in the debate as well, that gave a specific example on a day in March 2020 when Abbott Laboratories was given a federal grant. The same day he goes in and buys stock, and
wow.
This is something that Congress has basically exempted themselves from any censure here. I mean, they're able to do things that I think average Americans aren't. I don't think it's right. I called out long before John Curtis even came into the race, my contract with Utah, which my number one thing of 7 points is to ban the trading of individual stocks for members of Congress and their families. I don't think it's right that we allow them to do this. I've used the analogy, we don't allow referees to bet on the ball game. So why on earth would we allow members of Congress to trade individual stocks, over many of which they've got committee assignments where they're getting access to information. that other Americans just don't readily have. So, he's been a top trader in stocks where he's outperformed the S&P 500 year after year. I mean, this guy's trading record is so great. He ought to be, he ought to be a trader and not somebody who's a member of Congress, for crying out loud. But those are things that I want to do. I've made that commitment to work hard. I know Senator Hawley already has legislation on the House, or excuse me, the Senate side, and on the House side, Congressman Matt Gaetz has introduced legislation to ban the trading of individual stocks for members of Congress and their families, and we ought to do it. I want the balanced budget amendment. That's another point of mine. I want to ban retiring members of Congress from becoming lobbyists, for crying out loud, and going and enriching themselves, becoming defense
You're
contractors.
You're going to hurt everybody's feelings. You know that, right?
Well, and term limits is another thing in there. I've signed a term limit pledge, but to be honest, the more I've learned now, if we actually had these things and members of Congress couldn't go and enrich themselves the way that they do, they'd probably term limit themselves.
Yeah.
And especially if we stopped having all this lobbyist donations and PAC dollars flowing in, that's something as well that I think, and if we kept a caucus convention system, right, like we were just talking about, that's a way where an everyday Utahn like me, who's not a multimillionaire like my opponents, who isn't somebody who's funded by, these super PACs with climate change activists that have put $5 million, one guy alone, $5 million in the John Curtis's race, then we've got a shot to elect everyday Americans, everyday Utahns to go represent everyday Americans. And that's where we actually get the representation back. Whereas right now, sadly, many of these seats are for sale, and the elected officials are paying far more attention to their donors and the lobbyists and people that are bringing them money than they are their actual constituents.
Yeah, well, and all of this is of concern. I mean, some of it is just, hey, look, it shouldn't be right for you to use your position to enrich yourself. But I'll tell you, the insider trading stuff, that really sticks in my maw, because if I did it, I'd go to jail. Yeah. Right. But it's okay if they do it, apparently. Right. It's like it was the same thing with like Obamacare when they exempted themselves from that, or any other law that they passed. Right. It's like, no, look.
Complete double standard. Yeah.
Yeah. And but the other thing is we're not sending you over there so you can make $1 bajillion. We're sending you over there to do a job. And yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it feels like John and others are just not doing that job.
Yeah. Well, they're doing the job. They're representing themselves rather than the people. That's my problem with it. And we need people that are going to go represent all Utahns, everyday Utahns. And that's what I've committed to do. So I think that's what people need to know about me. And, they can definitely learn more about my background and some positions on issues at TrentStaggs.com. And we're happy to field questions. But I think those are some of the key differences that we've got between myself, other people in the field, and what I would bring, what I bring to the Senate.
Yep. And you said TrentStaggs.com. That's with 2 G's in Staggs.
That's right.
And are you looking for any other kind of support? I mean, I got blisters on my hands from putting up signs for you, but
well, thank you, Charles. No, that's great. I mean, if people do want to put up signs, if they really just talk to neighbors. I mean, this is how we get an everyday Utahn elected that doesn't have millions and millions of dollars being spent on his behalf. It's that, go out, talk to 10, 20 neighbors, convince them or tell them why you're supporting me. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah. We look at the delegates and the precinct chairs and everybody. If they all went out and got 20 households, we win in a landslide. So I hope that we can demonstrate that kind of power in this election, where so much money is being thrown at it in a primary from outside the state to try to influence Utahns and paint somebody as a conservative. We need people to go out and do their own homework. And, the delegates have done that largely. They've vetted all the candidates. They've identified me as the best person to represent the state. So we want to do that.
Yep. I'm just going to add in, because in Utah County, we have a 25-5-1 challenge. And the 25-5-1 is to go knock on 25 doors and hand out 5 of the flyers and put up at least one sign in somebody else's yard. Right. And when we're training our people. We had a training last week. We're doing another one tomorrow as we record this. But I mean, that's really what we're doing is you knock on the door and the questionnaires on your phone. But the first question is, are you going to vote in the primary? And the next question is, do you know who the nominees are? And then from there, we train them to talk about the nominees that they like and why they like them. And it makes a big difference. I was sitting at the Orem Parade, and Phil Lyman's crew walked by, right? Because they were at the end of the parade. And I was wearing a Phil Lyman shirt, and my mom and stepdad, and then my stepdad's daughter and her husband were both sitting there. And, so I stand up and I'm yelling and screaming. And so they both got signs to put in their yards, right? And it was just a matter of, hey, well, Chuck knows what he's talking about and Chuck likes him. And those are the kinds of conversations you need to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would be huge. Yeah, if everybody took on that challenge, we would most definitely win this election, this primary election.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know you have possibly another interview to get to. So as we wrap up, just thanks for coming and thanks for running. I think it really does say a lot that you were willing to stand up to Mitt Romney, that you stood up to the state and the powers that be, that you didn't buckle under the pressure, and that you have the principles that are going to align with what we want, and that you're going to go out there and represent us well in the Senate.
Well, thank you. No, I'm real appreciative of the party and the Utah County Republican Party in particular. You guys have been fantastic, and all the support and the flyers and everything you've been doing. So greatly appreciated. And we're looking forward to June 25th here. 2 weeks. We've got this election wrapped up, and we're looking forward to moving on and serving in the United States Senate.
Well, let's see it happen. All right, let's wrap it up here. Till next time, folks, Max out.